Hey there, everyone. This is Chris with Obsessed Garage. We have a special guest visitor with us here today. This is Rick, who is Matt's business coach. And if you've followed along for any amount of time, you've heard Matt refer to his business coach. You've heard him talk about some of the sayings that he has about equal exchange and value. Business is an excuse to be in a relationship. A lot of that stuff that you hear from Matt came from Rick and his coaching. And so with Matt being out of town, he's going back to California again for some sort of fun adventure out there. You know how he loves to travel. So he's headed back that way. So he asked Rick to come in, and we asked, as we usually do, we ask for questions on Facebook, on Instagram. We got a lot of great questions that I want to go over with. So first of all, welcome, Rick.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you for the invitation. I appreciate it.
I think it's going to be a good conversation. Those of you who are in the chat, it's not going to be the usual detailing-centric podcast, kind of like when Michelle was here. It's going to be a lot more based on what Rick knows, what I know. I do want to go over a couple things about the store here first before we get started, because we need to address a few things. So one of the things, and Bryce is going to bring it up on the screen here, the project updates page. Anytime you go to the store now, when you're in any section of the store, be it pressure washer, detailing, etc., you're going to see a link that takes you to product updates. And there's two very important things there. One is the new products we have in, because a lot of times that's what we get questions. What's new? What's new? What do I need? And then the other thing that we have there that's super important now is things that are currently out of stock, whether they were we didn't get enough from our supplier, we're still waiting on the shipment, like the Mosmatic wands recently. So that's where we're going to list that. So hopefully that'll help kind of communicate with you. Okay, my order hasn't shipped. Where's my stuff? As it says right there on the screen. And that'll list, okay, here's what we're waiting for, and here's the ETA and when we hope to have that out to you. So those are some updates for you in terms of the store. I want to dive right in here with Rick. And first of all, just maybe tell us, how did you and Matt meet? How did that come about? How did you end up becoming his business coach?
Well, this is an interesting one because Matt came in with two of his partners when he was in his previous career, and they wanted me to fix Matt. So they come into a 8-week course for CEOs, and Matt had his arms folded, had his feet crossed, and he was just sitting there, and all of a sudden he starts smiling and smiling more as I start engaging his two partners. And he just got into it, got hooked into it. And he became fun to play with too, because he didn't get really hooked, although his partners did. So we wound up just becoming friends. And it's developed from there. And it's been a great relationship.
Excellent. So from what you say, and I think he's mentioned this in the past, so he wasn't all that excited about coming in the first time, would you?
He was not.
Okay.
At all.
And that was their idea to bring him in.
That was.
To quote unquote fix him. Okay. Gotcha. Excellent. All right. So that was then how many years ago?
Let me see. Where's a plaque? I don't know. I lost time.
He's got the My Business up there. That
That's
looks
it.
Like,
whatever that date is.
Gotcha. So at least probably 2 or 3 years ago. Would that be?
Or more.
Okay. And then, okay, so that was when he was in his previous career before this whole Obsessed Garage thing happened. So you've been with him kind of since before this even came about.
Yes. This was a hobby.
Gotcha. Okay, and so I want to get to a couple of questions that we have here. Because some of our Facebook group members gave us some really good questions here, so I wanted to speak to these. So let's start with this one. Rick, you've coached many people over the years and have given advice to many. How do you get someone who is stuck to make a decision and follow your coaching?
I don't.
Okay, explain what you mean by that.
When someone hires us as a coach, then we can't be more committed to their business than they are. So if they're committed to going to the next level or scaling it, whatever it is that they're looking to accomplish, and we're coaching to that, we're coaching to what they say they're committed to, and we just have to believe they are. If it turns out that they're committed in theory but not in action, then they're not going to follow through with it. That happens very, very seldom. Normally, it's somebody that um, actually shouldn't be in business, and they don't treat their employees very well because you can't count on them. There's no accountability there.
So in your relationship with Matt and working with him, would you say then that he's receptive to new ideas, that he is gung-ho, that he's kind of reserved? How would you say when it comes to working with Matt?
Some people, from what I hear, say he's kind of headstrong and very, I don't want to say positional, but he knows what he wants when he wants it. I don't have that experience with him. When we're talking, he's listening, and apparently he's on his best behavior, which I didn't realize until today. And he has been very coachable. But to be an effective leader, you have to be a good follower and a good leader, and you have to be a good coachee if you're going to run your business and coach.
Got it. Okay, so let me ask you this: let's talk briefly about you. How did you become a business coach? Like, what does that look like? If I wanted to become a business coach, what would I have to do or go through, or how does that work?
Well, I was in the Marine Corps 8 years. When I got out of the Marine Corps, I went into financial planning for a little over 23 years. And one day I had my wife come in and replace one of my staff. And she realized I was doing all day long what I was doing all night long, and that was coaching. So a doctor would come in, write a $400,000 or $500,000 check. That would take 2 to 3 minutes. They'd stay 2 to 3 hours and talk about their practice or a business owner at their business. So she said, well, either stop doing it or start charging for it. And over a year and a half, I transitioned out of the financial planning and into coaching.
Oh, and I'm glad you used that word, transitioned. Some of the questions that we get, Matt gets these personally via email, and we also got a couple in the Facebook group here. People are, and I'm going to go to, let's see, David Johnson here from Facebook. What coaching or advice would you give to someone in their early 40s looking to make a career change, and how would they identify a career that they're passionate about? So first of all, about what age were you when you made that switch?
I was in my 40s, actually.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
And so what advice then would you give to someone kind of in that similar situation? It may not be coaching, it might be detailing full-time, or it could be who knows what.
As you read that, I didn't get that he knew what his passion was yet. Is that correct?
Yes, based on that, yeah.
Okay. Most of us don't know what our passion is because we're just doing us. But those of us that are married, their spouse can generally give you a hint about what your passion is. Your best friends can tell you like where you contribute to them. And when that goes on, then you start realizing what your passion is, because it's not special to you. It's special to those that receive it. So that's part one. If you do it for nothing, that's your passion. And when you would do it for nothing, but you can determine how to turn it into a business and financially support yourself and your family with it, it's a blessing.
And I know there are kind of two camps. Some people say, I'm going to do it. I'm not going to think about the ramifications. I'm just going for it. I'm burning the bridges and let's go, and I've got to make it work. And some people want to get that boat a little closer to the dock and say, no, I need to be at this number before I get there. So for someone who maybe struggles with that, or they're not sure exactly, is there anything where you can say, okay, this is when you want to do it, or this is when it's wisest maybe to make that choice?
Everybody's situation is different, and the style of person is different. Some are going to be more cautious than others. Some are going to be executors and they just go for it. So there's no right or wrong way to do it, but I would get somebody outside of themselves that can be objective with them as a sounding board, so it can build their confidence, reaffirm whether they're heading in the right direction, or somebody can see a stumbling block for them.
Gotcha. This question comes from Larry on Facebook, Larry Velez. How would you coach someone to understand if and when they have hit the limits of their potential?
Well, I know Larry, so hello, Larry. It's good to hear from you. I don't think people hit the limits of their potential. I think people create the limits of their potential. So you can accomplish anything that you're passionate enough to accomplish if you're committed to it. And if you're not, maybe that's why you don't move forward. Maybe you're in the wrong field. Maybe you started out there, but you've outgrown it, and you might want to relook at that.
Well, and you've addressed something here. Matt's spoken with me before on our podcast here about setting goals. He's not a big fan of setting goals. I want to do $1 million in sales this year. I want to do whatever. I want to read 25 books, whatever it happens to be. Could you address that? Because you kind of touched on it there with potential. Because I think what Matt believes is some people, if you limit yourself to my goal is only X, whatever it is, then you may never get past it because once you hit X, you're happy. So could you address that?
Sure. I don't think a goal is what you want to be looking at. What's the result you're looking to cause or generate? Because the result isn't going to be a number. The result's going to be the quality of your life. It's going to be dwelling in your passion, seeking it out, building on it, scaling it. The money that comes from that, it's just a reaction to who you are as an individual, and the individual, that's really what's important.
And Matt actually mentioned something about that last week. The money's just a result.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yep.
He's stealing more of your words there.
Well, he's doing what he's really passionate about, and he just loves it. So he would do this for nothing.
Right.
He did do it for nothing,
right,
as a matter of fact. And now he's learned how to turn this into financially support his lifestyle, which is pretty cool.
That's very cool. I think that's what a lot of people are looking for is, Matt would do this if there were no money, if he was the only one here with no camera, and we all kind of look for, what is that for me?
There's another part when it relates to Matt. The OCD part of him is the pain that he experienced. So he went to therapists, he sought out different help. When you can learn to turn your pain into a contribution, which is what he's learned to do, that's a very powerful mechanism. So, and that's when you come full circle.
I like what you said there. Turn pain into a contribution. Okay, this is a great question, which as a coach, you could address this, I think, really well. He was asking the question to Matt, but I think you could answer this. What would you recommend looking for in a good coach? So if someone out there is, maybe they own their own business or they're starting a business and they're looking for someone, how do they make that connection? How do they decide maybe if it's right for them? How do you do that with your customers that you work with?
Well, we've defined that we're not trainers, we're not mentors, we're coaches, which means that we don't know what it is that the person we're coaching knows, and we don't claim to. Like, we don't have the right way for them to do something. We're just a sounding board. Sometimes we're a rent-a-friend, sometimes we're a sounding board, sometimes we're, where they can let it all out and just relieve their frustration. So a good coach, I think, knows that they have nothing of value to say. It's the generosity of whoever's listening to give them value.
I want to steal this question here from chat and maybe phrase it in a way that kind of as it relates to Matt, because we touched on his OCD and using that pain. Which of Matt's attributes do you think has contributed the most to OG's success and growth? Thoroughness, willing to chase a solution to the ends of the earth, his vision, etc. Anything out there that kind of stands out for him as it relates to growing and growing?
Really his obsession to perfection. That's how I call it.
And has any of that rubbed off on you? Like, do you care about the way your car looks? Have you learned anything from Matt? Let's put it that way.
I just recently bought a car for my wife, and then I had to come in here and actually buy some stuff for the car.
And you wouldn't have done that before?
No.
Okay, gotcha. Excellent. Let's see. This one, I really like Dan's question here. He has 3 or 4 questions from Facebook, Dan Digna. What value does a bachelor's degree bring to the table that work experience does not? So in your experience, is there even a difference between when you have someone, do you ask their educational background? Do you care about that? Does that make a difference?
As it relates to being a coach?
Correct.
It teaches you to think going through that process, but I think that's about where it ends. Experience is going to be key because you understand how to be patient and compassionate with the coaching that the other person's experiencing. They're not always going to jump on it. They're not always going to accept it. Or maybe they'll jump and do it wrong and then come back and do it again. So I'd say it's valuable, but it's not the essence of what will make a excellent coach.
Okay, excellent. That makes sense. And this is a little bit related to one we've discussed before. How does one go about vetting a business coach? So let's say I was interested in being a client of yours and working with you. What kind of background would you recommend that I do? Okay, would I ask maybe former clients? Would I look at, how would that work, do you think?
Former clients are a good way to do it, but I'd ask questions to the coach around what I'm interested in. If they give you an answer that's academic, it's probably not going to be a great experience. If they give you answers that make sense, like common sense, that's going to be much more valuable. And you want to look for, are they giving you answers that you can accept? Do you even like the person, how they look? Because when you get into this relationship, it's really a partnership. It's almost like you're in business with somebody.
Right. So and let me see if I can phrase this well. So let's say, no, I'm not going to do that. I'll stay away from that one. I'm going to get back to that eventually. I want to talk more about maybe your relationship with Matt. How does that look for him? Do you meet once a week? Do you come in? I already know some of this, of course, because I'm here. But how does that look in terms of how often do you meet? Could he call you at midnight if he wanted to? Does he share confidential information with you? What does that relationship look like?
From a logistics standpoint, we have 2 scheduled meetings a month for an hour and a half each. The first one-on-one with him and my partner, Nancy Klotz. And then the second one with he and his management team or key employees. There are no limits to the unscheduled meetings. There's no limits to unscheduled calls. It's 24/7. I'm a little grouchier than Nancy is, so he'd probably want to call her, at night, and call me anywhere from 3 o'clock in the morning on.
Gotcha. And Nancy, and I know Nancy, I have a relationship with Nancy. She brings, like you said, you're a little more grouchy. She brings a different dynamic. So what's her role in your relationship with OG? What does she do maybe differently than you?
Well, let's start with, she was the mayor of her community in Tavares, and she transformed her community, which is what interested me in getting to know her, because I had retired when I met her for a year and a half. And I couldn't find anybody to do what I did the way I did it. So when I met her and she transformed her community into the only seaplane city in the world, I said, well, this is interesting. So we met for a year and a half, just for lunch once a month, no agenda. And she was due to come up for
Re-election?
Yeah, re-election. And so it just transitioned into us working together. I was bored with the retirement part of it. And what she does with Matt, she's very gifted as an artist. She understands the mechanisms of the municipality, and she just brings a woman's point of view, frankly.
Which is very valuable, as we learned a couple weeks ago with Michelle here on the podcast. Let's see, I want to address one more question here from Dan. This one's also kind of academically related. For someone looking at starting or running a business, what advantages and disadvantages are there between certain degrees, whether it's you have an MBA or an accounting degree, organizational development? Would it be best to pick a specific one of these and pair it with additional training and certification in one of the other areas?
Well, you always want to be at the top of the game, but there are a lot of college professors that never were in business, and they have more degrees than you can shake a stick at. So it just depends on where you're pairing this up. If you're going into a field that you really like, if it's a skill set type of field or it's an advisory type of field, all that's going to make a difference.
Let me read this question here. And Matt and I recently discussed, and I know you know about this, he was talking about the employees that he chooses, and he doesn't want a bunch of mini me's running, mini hims running around, because for many reasons. So this question from Joe here in the chat, I want to share this with you. What's the most important advice you would give to someone who doesn't want to start their own business, but wants to be as successful as possible working in the corporate world or working wherever it happens to me? So that kind of applies to me. I have no desire to run my own business, to be president, CEO of Sass Garage. But what would I do to be the best that I could be when it comes to fitting in or doing the best where I am?
picking an organization that is a natural fit for you, that you have an interest in whatever it is they provide. Also, having a conversation with the CEO or president about what's important to you. Like, have a future growth plan. Don't just come to work and get a job. Like, why are you here other than the paycheck? Because if you're here only for the paycheck, it won't last long, and then you'll be somewhere else for the paycheck.
This is a good question. We talked about some things. If I were looking to hire a business coach, what should I look for? What are some red flags to look for if I'm looking for someone to kind of lead me and guide me?
You don't want people to lead you and guide you.
Okay.
You're the lead and you're the guide. You want their feedback as to what are the possible pluses and minuses of it. But if you've got a coach that's telling you how to, you've got the wrong coach. Like I said a couple of minutes ago, there's nothing we have to say of value. It's the generosity of whoever's listening that gives it value. So I wouldn't be telling you I'm a good coach. If someone tells me I'm a good coach that I'm coaching, then I am. But if they don't, then it's not up to me.
Well, let me ask you this, because this is kind of a personal thing for me. Before I came and started working here, Matt and I talked about this for a while, and we threw it back and forth for over a year. And then before I actually started, the three of us, me, you, and Matt, had a conversation. And so as you're working with people like Matt, what are you looking for? And we can relate it specifically to him and to me, since I'm here. I give you permission.
Okay, fair enough.
To, like, what were you looking for? What were some things where you're like, ooh, maybe this isn't a good fit, or maybe I think this is a great fit? How do you do that?
Matt knew you were a good fit. He'd worked out with you for a period of years, I think 6 years, if I remember correctly. He liked you. You apparently liked him. And you got along. That's it. I mean, it's not Einstein, you know? If you like each other, you like the industry he's in, you see a possibility for yourself, for your growth, and to be challenged and have it interesting and be treated fairly and paid fairly, then, you know, and if there's no cap on your potential here, then you're golden, huh?
Definitely. I want to bring up something that came up in the Facebook group recently, because it relates to employees and keeping people and maintaining people. And the question was basically, how do I find people who are the right fit? Every time I get someone who's good, they figure out they're pretty good and they leave to go do something bigger and better. Or the people I can get are only the quote unquote bottom of the barrel, or whatever it happens to be. When there was a conversation you and I had about Matt choosing employees, and it was people that he already had a relationship with, that he knew. And you thought that was a good thing. So kind of explain that. You don't want to just go hire someone just because the resume looks good, but you want to hire maybe someone that you know or you have experience. Why is that?
Because you know them. You know their pitfalls, you know their pluses, minuses. Also, if you're hiring off of a resume versus a personal introduction or a referral, then you're hiring blind, and then it's trial and error. Here, he used his best judgment as to whether this has a real possibility. As a matter of fact, he convinced me that you were absolutely the perfect person to hire before you were hired. So it's how he described you, what he saw in you, how you fit into the organization. And because he already had that carved out and he had the picture of what it looks like, then if you have the same one, it's a natural.
Got it.
And it's been like that pretty much for everybody that's here.
Right, and Michelle addressed that actually when we spoke about, things have grown and gotten better, and we're improving, and we're learning new stuff every day and improving as we go. And she said, a big part of it was just making sure the right people are in the right places, because of course no one can do anything on their own. But if you have a bunch of people, if you have 20 people who aren't very good, you're also not going to do.
Well, here's the thing. When Matt identifies somebody, then he's already sold on them, and now he offers the opportunity. If a person's coming to him and saying, I really hate where I am, I need to make a change, you don't want to hire that person. You want to hire somebody that sees a possibility greater than where they are, is why they leave, not because they're disgruntled. Because if they leave where they're disgruntled, they're going to be disgruntled with you at some point in time.
Gotcha. That makes sense. I want to talk about, a lot of people ask Matt, we get emails, there's comments on his YouTube videos. It's a big thing in any business is time management. Their big question is, okay, how can you wash all the cars, run this business, go to California, do this, this, and this? And so when it comes to someone who's running a business, at some point they have to back off a lot of different areas and let other people take hold. So what advice can you give, or how can you speak towards time management as it relates to someone running a business?
It's a crazy one. So many people spend so much money looking to obtain or manage time management. But think about this. There's only 24 hours in a day. There's 7 days in a week. There's 168 hours a week to work or to play. So it never changes. So it'd be like you driving a car and there's a telephone pole that never moves and you hit the pole. So was it the pole that needed to be managed, or were the activities that you were not adjusting needed to be adjusted? So when time doesn't ever change, it's finite. How hard is that to manage when it doesn't change? So what you want to manage are the activities within that time frame that you have and prioritize. And you do that with a calendar. Now, a lot of people go to these group workshops and they'll buy this book that they can write notes in. They can write whatever their schedule is. They can write whatever. And then about 3 months into it, their weekly meeting changes from 7 o'clock to 9 o'clock, and then they have to do that almost 52 times more. So if you get just a computer calendar, have everything in it. When you get out of bed, you follow it. When you go to bed, you forget it.
I know you're a big proponent of calendars. You say basically kind of, you don't worry about anything. Calendar just tells you where to go, when to go, right?
Yep, I don't have to remember anything. I don't have to get blindsided. I don't have to worry about getting blindsided. You just put it down. And that manages your day. When I look at a calendar and people have maybe 2 appointments on the calendar, they don't have a job, especially if they're a leader.
Some of the conversations that Matt and I have had here on the podcast talk about his role kind of shifting to being a CEO, even though he doesn't really like the term, but basically backing off and allowing, because he thinks if rather than basically the way he put it was, I know I could do that job a million times better than anyone I could have in that position, but I can't because I have to do this. And that's a struggle for him. So for other people out there who are gaining employees, who are wanting to back off and manage that well, what advice do you have to give there?
I just say promote yourself mentally. A CEO that starts his own business never got hired to do a job. He has a position where the buck stops with him. Everybody after that is hired into it, and it has to be accountable for the job they were hired into. When the CEO leaves his position, he loses the vision. And he's also competing with whatever area of his business he's going into that someone else is supposed to have the authority to be in charge of. So they either have to sit there and wait till Matt gets done, or they can say, get out, Matt, and possibly get fired,
Right.
So, and they don't want to do that.
I want to address this question. Do you have advice on how to create and then keep true professional relationships? That's from you. Like when I go to work, I have friends at work. I have friends at the gym. I have friends from college. I have friends everywhere. But when it comes to maintaining business relationships, I guess, or establishing relationships maybe with our vendors or with anyone, what advice do you have to give on that?
Be appropriate to the situation you're dealing with.
Okay. So could you give an example of that, what that might look like?
Well, if you're dealing with a vendor and the vendor hasn't changed his price points with you at all, and you've done a lot more business with that vendor, then you might start a conversation about volume discounts, how, whether it's 30, 60, or 90 days that you pay, those kind of things. So you always want to set it up where you're challenging everybody that does business with Obsessed Garage. Everybody. And that keeps them on their feet. That has them offer you deals instead of you begging for deals.
Right. I want to speak to Matt shared in the videos his, I forget the exact wording, but basically the grand plan, the vision, whether it's 5, 10 years, however long. And I think you maybe helped put him in a place to do that with the right folks. So was that his kind of idea? Did you lead him there and say, maybe you want to do this? How did that whole thing work out?
He wanted to be on a grand scale without specifics. And Nancy said, well, my sister does that very thing. So we went through a process of picking his brain and documenting everything that we picked, and then drawing a picture around that, and the pros and cons and all the financials also. So he went through a whole process of knowing where he'd be in the next 10 or 20 years, how much it's going to cost. He had all the documentation so he could take it to a bank, should he want to take it to a bank or an investor. He knew what the buildings were going to be made out of, what the shape, what the specific uses would be within that, or what the road work would be, how many acres, everything. So it's very specific. Now, it's not specific so that he goes and does it. It's specific so he can see what's involved and learn what's involved with putting this together in a very analytical fashion. Now it's changing. It's not looking quite like, the picture.
Right.
But it's developing, and it's developing very quickly. So it has him focus on where he's going instead of where he is or where he's been.
And I know this probably varies case by case, but is there a point in a small business where you would recommend that someone do that? Whether it's, okay, I own my own detailing business, I'm getting to a certain point, should I do that now? Is it a certain income they should be at? Is there just where they are mentally and maybe they're not ready for that?
They'll know, because they'll be asking the questions. And when they start asking the questions, that's when you know they know.
Gotcha. And Matt gave us permission to dig a little bit into Matt. So I want to ask one question, because some folks, like you said, when we sit here, Matt and I sit here and discuss detailing or Porsche dealerships or whatever, he's what's a good way to put it? He's in a position, he knows a lot of that information. And so he's comfortable speaking to that, and he can be, people maybe see him as set in his ways, or he's not going to change or hard-headed like we discussed. Mm-hmm. But you said, obviously, in your experience, it's different with him because he's learning and he's soaking it all in. And so has there been a time when you two have worked together where you told him something, or maybe you asked a certain question and he was just like, no, I'm not doing that. That's stupid. As he would say that's stupid or that's bullcrap. Those are his words.
That's pretty much his words.
Right.
Yeah, there's been probably 3. And I can't be specific with you only because I can't remember the specifics. Been a while ago.
Right.
But where he's challenged in areas that he might not be as confident in, that's when it shows up.
Gotcha.
But he thinks through it, and then he comes around.
Okay, and then one of the questions that Michelle and I discussed yesterday actually was, he, as we get bigger, move forward, as OG continues to grow, sometimes, and I think you were involved or you knew about the property that he was going to see. And sometimes, like, he has these giant grand ideas, and when you got to act on them now, and then as she put it, then he'll call Rick, and Rick will kind of calm him down and say, okay, let's think about this. So there are times when you find yourself saying, whoa, slow down, or do you encourage that? Like, how do you draw the line between, I want you to reach your potential, I want you to do this awesome stuff, but at the same time, whoa.
In the coaching, we're looking for him to spread his thinking. And when he went to look at that mansion, for example, he got a completely different experience out of that. And he loved this room, and he liked that room, and he could figure out what this room was going to be good for and where he's going to put this and that and the other thing. That part, whether he bought the building or he didn't buy the building, it doesn't really matter. It's having him go through these processes of focus, thought, and the reality. Like, that's a really big mansion. So it was a real good exercise for him to do that. And we encourage that. Now, his interpretation is go buy it. Okay? Our interpretation is go feel it. So there's a difference. And once he goes, and whether he wants to buy it or not, but if his frame of mind or conversation is around that, that's when we kind of dilute it just a bit.
Gotcha. Yeah, and as we explored and kind of looked around, okay, what would it cost to build a building closer, this new building that we're working on, and when you look at the cost of that on the tiny piece of property that is versus that, and it's not, I mean, relatively speaking, it's not that expensive, but it's still expensive. And so that's been a fun process for me, is looking at things and trying to make the wise decision while also wanting to push forward. Let's see, I want to get to a couple other questions here. As Matt was maybe going through his transition from his former job to starting this, were you in that process, were you encouraging? Were you, hey, maybe we'll want to back off on this? How did you maybe help him through that, or help him see what he needed to see there as he made that transition?
When he did the Obsessed Garage website, then he was going to do another website that related to his previous business. And we suggested he not do that because he didn't need to sell anything. All he needed to do was explain things. So through Obsessed Garage, if he were creditable there, that would automatically build the bridge over to the previous occupation. He didn't have to do anything with that. It's just who he is, how he's being, and who would you want looking at your assets? Somebody obsessed or somebody that was nonchalant?
Right.
So if he's going to be obsessed about one thing, he's going to be obsessed about everything, and that's like perfect.
As a business coach, what is maybe the thing that you enjoy most about what you do, and then what's one of maybe the cons that you don't always like?
Really don't have cons that I can think of. The joy is when people grow, like Matt. When you see this kind of progression and you see the transition and the mental flexibility that he demonstrates on a day-to-day basis, you think about it, he didn't have any employees in January 2016. Now he's got 9. That's pretty cool.
Right.
Okay. He had a vision of a building, okay, but it didn't look like this, and it didn't look like the one he's looking to put up in addition to this. So that is really massive growth over a 2.5-year period.
And approximately then, as someone who's a business coach, do you work with 5 people a month? Do you work with 100? Does it kind of fluctuate from time to time, or is that not matter to you?
We work, our average client lasts between 4.5 to 7 years.
Oh, wow.
So we don't have a turnover. Once we have a turnover, like somebody gives us the 30-day notice, then we replace them. But we don't replace them until we need to.
Gotcha. That seems like a very low turnover. Is that?
That's a very low turnover.
Okay, that's what I thought. Here's a question from someone in chat. Rick, some in this group think that Matt has changed, I guess, since they began watching and following. How do you coach someone who has had quick success? That's an interesting phrase. And keep them humble.
We talk about it a lot because when you don't have any money, you're just a really nice person. And, you're passionate about what you're doing, so it's very clean. It's very pure. When you start making money and being able to continue to grow, people are they're going to be checking you out. They want to see if you're still Matt, or you're Matt with an agenda, or you're just Matt. And Matt is just Matt. That's the good part. He wouldn't have acquired as many employees at the quality if he weren't. And he understands that he has to be aware of this. It's just a natural instinct to become somewhat independent. So we have conversations about being independent. Like if you're independently wealthy, you don't need people. You just, you don't, because you can do whatever you want to do without them. If you become dependent on them, that doesn't work either, because somebody's blood is getting sucked out of them. But if you're interdependent, where there's an equal exchange of value for both. Now it's pure.
Okay, so and we're getting low on time here for you. I know you've got somewhere to be, so I want to close things down here. But as we move forward, are there things that you're really looking forward to when it comes to Obsessed Garage? I know you enjoy working with Matt. Do you have any personal vision? You're like, man, I can't wait till they do this, or I can't wait to do this.
He's going at a pretty good pace. So it isn't like I have it in my mind. He's got it in his mind.
Right.
It's having him discover what he already knows, but he may not be conscious to yet. And as this evolves, it's going to open up those kind of conversations.
Excellent. All right. Well, if people, let's say someone was, if they want to work with you, do they need to be local? Could they be living in Alaska, Antarctica?
All over the world.
Oh, really?
I used to work all over the world.
Okay.
Until I retired, and throughout the Caribbean. And now we do things, we because of Zoom, technology, we can work with anybody anywhere. It's really cool.
So then if someone wanted to contact you and reach out to you, how would they do that? What does that look like?
They could call me direct, 352-360-8244, or rick@thecorbingroup.com.
There you go. Excellent. Well, Rick, I do appreciate you being here.
Okay, thank you. I enjoyed it.
I know Matt will enjoy watching this. We didn't probably dig as deep as he wanted to and expose him for some
who
of the
he
things.
really is.
Exactly. But those of you who did tune in, I appreciate you guys tuning in as well. Next week, I believe Matt will be Matt. I have to look at the calendar. He'll be back. He's got to go to California this week and then in 2 more weeks. But I think next week we'll be back on our Thursday at 11 a.m. If you have questions, you can reach out to me, Chris at Obsessed Garage. And if you're just now catching the end of this, we're going to put it on YouTube later. You can rewatch it, or it's always available via the Dialed In podcast. So thanks for tuning in, and we will see you again next week.